Thank you very much for attending this lunchtime learning lounge with us, BB7. You may all know BB7 more from our fire capabilities. However, we've got a really good consultancy for security solutions. So today in the Learning Lounge, we're going to be doing something slightly different, and we're going to be talking about the protect duty. So you're not just hearing from me, we've got Richard and Chris from our security department who's going to lead you through a little bit about what that means for you, what the impact is for your developments, your organisations, your places of work, and what things you're going to need to start considering. Now the first slide, Becca. Thank you. So for those of you that don't know, hopefully a lot of you know us already, we are BB7. We're the UK's largest independent fire and security firm. Fire being predominantly what we do, however, we've got a really good security department who are headed up by Richard and Chris. Richard, if you want to say hello, a little bit about yourself.
Hi everyone. So yeah, my name is Richard Postma, Head of Security Engineering for BB7. Yeah, we're currently working on various projects across the world, predominantly in the UK, but some Middle Eastern ones as well. And I work alongside Chris Aldous, a close colleague of mine. We've been working together for over, I think, 15 or 16 years now. So we've got a good experience on many security projects across the globe.
Okay, nice to meet you all. I'm Chris Aldous, so I run Design Security Limited. I'm a chartered security professional. I predominantly get involved and develop strategies for clients, and then work in conjunction with Richard in making those strategies come to fruition. Because what we do tend to find is that people come up with great ideas, but they don't physically know how to then apply it to the built environment. So between the two of us, we're very adept at making things work to buy down risk and ensure that your business operations can continue.
Perfect, thank you guys. This is a quite huge topic. It'll have quite substantial impact on an awful lot of sectors. So we're going to try and get through it as much as we can as in this sort of hour time. Can I ask if we leave questions till the end? At the end, if you don't want to stick your hand up, you can always send me a message and I'll ask the question out loud. Yeah, we'll hand over to Richard and Chris.
So the first element is, what is the protect duty? As it says there, it comes on the back of Martin's Law, and Figan Murray, who you may have seen in the news, she's been instrumental following the loss of her son at the Manchester Arena in getting venues, public spaces, etc., and legislation to move forward so that organisations actually have to make an appreciation of terrorism and the impacts it will have on their business. It then became a manifesto pledge by the Conservative Party, and that's why it's being driven forward at this moment. It's been through the first round of consultation. There's been a series of reports written about where it is, and we're now waiting to see what the next steps are. It was supposed to be, we were looking originally that the protect duty would commence sometime towards the latter stages of this year, but with COVID and everything else, things have taken a bit of a back seat at the moment. Okay, so the areas that it's going to impact relate to public venues, and the first question normally is, what is a public venue? Okay, because effectively what they're looking at is a classification that says anywhere that can hold 100 or more members of the public. Likewise, it can also affect large organisations. So, for instance, any organisation with more than 250 employees across the UK, regardless of the size of operations that it has, but if they've got 250 employees, if they've got anywhere that's open to the public, they would fall in scope. And the last large area are public spaces, and these predominantly are relatable to local government spaces, so parks, beaches, any sports, leisure centres, any of those areas would all fall within the scope of the protect duty. Okay, so it's quite a diverse element that we've got to consider. And obviously in understanding the impacts, the biggest thing is for yourselves is to understand what are the likely impacts at your, whatever your business or organization does. If you're open to the public, do you meet any of the criteria? Do you fall within scope of the protect duty?
Chris, how does it that those types of organisations or venues that you talked about can differ wildly from something like a football stadium to I don't know, a concert venue or something like that, or an art gallery? How does the scope affect them all in the same way? So, or does it more onerous on the more people you have in, the more onerous it becomes?
Potentially, the more onerous, yes, it will become more onerous the larger the volume of people you have. It was one of our concerns that when we first read the documentation, because effectively a village hall can hold more than, can hold 100, normally 100 members of the public. Well, it's like, would that realistically be seen as a site that would attract terrorism? So it all goes back to, you've got to start with that risk assessment element to understand, is it applicable to you? What assessment of it do you have? What's the probability and impact of you being attacked? And then from that, you would then obviously develop your mitigation measures. Large stadiums, normally as a rule, because of the various guidance that's in place and the standards that are in place, terrorism always comes up because it gets involved at the planning stages. It's mainly aimed at crowd management. But like I say, for the smaller venues, for small museums and galleries, it's not normally seen as something that they would consider in their security planning. So yes, certainly does have a significant impact.
Does it mainly come in terms of the roadmap of buildings? Does it mainly come in at that design stage, or is it, for existing premises?
All existing premises will need to demonstrate, once it becomes legislation, they will need to demonstrate that they've understood whether their particular building is likely to be subject to a terrorist attack and what that might look like, and then develop their resilience plan around it. New builds, I've been involved in the new building game probably too long, but even now we still get large stadium projects where they still push back on security. So this is a bit of a game changer in the fact that it's going to be legislated, but like fire has been for many years, where you must do, and you've got to be able to show that process, that you've understood what the risks are, and then you've taken the appropriate mitigation measures. For smaller venues, that could just be sending your staff on an online training course that NATSO run. For bigger organisations, it may be upgrading the first aid training for stewards and marshals, etc.
Can you elaborate a little bit about what it means by space? So are we talking about a building in the area of the immediate vicinity, or can space literally be an outside area?
It can very much be an outside area, as we see, say for instance, when we have large sporting, let's say a large football event, say the Euros or something like that. If we host those, what we tend to find is that we use the large green spaces, all of a sudden become pop-up fan villages. So in goes the TVs, the sound systems, the bars, depending where you are in the world. And those spaces now, those what would be seen public spaces, okay, now would fall definitely within the scope of the way the protect duty is written at this moment, because now whether the fan zone's operated, shall we say, by the local authority or operated by another provider, there still needs to be a coming together and an understanding of what terrorist threat would this event attract, if any.
I think a good example of that might be something along the lines of Christmas markets. Whereas, you might expect a town centre in a city like Bath to have, relatively dense shopping populations, but come along Christmas market time, that population density goes through the roof, and suddenly you find yourself with massive crowds. And we've seen in the past various attacks on Christmas markets in Europe. So, that's probably a prime example of where normally the space is relatively uncontrolled, and along comes a market installation, and it changes the dynamic massively.
It's a good point. I will just chime in with sort of Natalie's question here. It's a good question. So Natalie works for the NHS. Is there anything specific for health facilities in the guidance?
No, they're not listed, and further in we were going to talk about exclusions and the like. At the moment, it would appear that the health service are well within scope of it. So yeah, having lost my way around many a hospital, trying to secure one around terrorism aspects would be quite a daunting task. So at the moment, I would say that you're within the scope of it, because I've not seen anything to say that you would be excluded from. And
I'm presuming that the risk is actually heightened because there was an attack not so long ago in a hospital, wasn't there?
We don't know whether it was aimed at the hospital or aimed at the remembrance service just down the road, where where the attempted bomber went off in the taxi. So yeah, but it's not. There have been instances in the past in Middle Eastern countries where hospitals have been targeted, particularly after normally there's a precursor incident. It drives a collection of the injured, and then they target them again at the hospital location.
A couple of points on the sort of public spaces. I know a lot of residential developments are putting an awful lot of effort into creating more of a community space. So although there are residential dwellings, there's a big impetus to try and create a space, an area. So that would definitely fall under the impacts of this law.
Yes, the question would be who's responsible. And this is one of the issues that we see. It's about defining for landowners and operators, understanding what is it that they're responsible for and where other parties may impact upon them. Because there's certain things that, let's say you create a nice sort of a village green effect, and you've got your residential properties outside. Who controls the village green? Whose responsibility is it? And if you use it for, let's say you're going to have a village gathering, who's responsible for now doing the risk assessment process for that? Okay, so understanding where those responsibilities lay, who ultimately carries the risk and must take action to show that they're mitigating the risk. In that said, if you flick to the next slide, Rebecca, please. If you do the risk assessment elements, you then start understanding what it is that you have that you physically can control, and more importantly, what it is that you can't control that you then need to rely possibly on a third party, i.e. input from the policing services or the ambulance services and so on and so forth. So until you go through that risk assessment and understand what it is you have to deal with, you won't fully understand how you can mitigate against a terrorist incident.
Will it have the same? So I know within the fire safety order, there's a part with regards to coordination. So perhaps you're sharing a space with someone else, or perhaps you're a hotel right next to a stadium. Is there a duty for those responsible people to share information?
There isn't an express duty to do it, but as having worked on some very large events, sporting events, it's practical to sit down with and identify the stakeholders that impact on how your venue runs, but more importantly, how your venue may impact on them, because this is where you start to then understand the mechanics of how the space, should something happen, is actually going to operate for you or not, is in the case. I'm doing a project at the moment, it's a government building, where it's had one review and they said, oh, you need to blast harden all the glass in the roof. And I said, don't bother. I said, because if a bomb goes off, your building's going to fall over anyway. So no point hardening the glass. So unless you understand that environment that you're applying the controls to, and that includes the organisations that feed into your environment, then it becomes very problematic just to make quick decisions on, oh, well, that's the answers to that question.
What would worry me slightly is that, I understand the risk assessment process, and to complete a risk assessment, you've got to be competent. But to be competent in something like terrorism, it's relatively new for this country. I mean, terrorism is going along a long time, but for every development building to have that understanding of risk, there's not going to be enough people out there with that competence. How do they do that?
It's also a good point, because establishing competency of the people that are going to give you advice, my first start point would be, we have the Centre for Protection of National Infrastructure. So they have, at the top tier would be what they call the RSES, the Register of Security Engineers and Specialists. They do and design the counter-terrorist measures, so your hostile vehicle mitigation, they'll advise on blast and so on and so forth. The next under there is the likes of myself, so we're a chartered professional, so we've got a credible history. I get access to CPNI information, I can liaise with them over constructions, etc. So straight away, you've got to start looking at the person that's going to give you the advice. Where have they, shall we say, got their training? I was very fortunate that Her Majesty's government paid me to go and travel to all the really wrong countries of the world and learn
all the glamorous places, Chris.
Yeah, all the really good places. Yeah, I will point out that the Cold War started after I retired, or the new Cold War, should I say. Obviously, Putin was waiting for me to step aside. But so what I'm saying is that, you know, looking at competency, they've still yet to actually portion out how you determine competencies. Normally, throughout the police and constabularies, you'll get the counter-terrorist security advisors, CTSAs. They are a useful set of knowledge to go and ask about. All I will say is that sometimes they'll come back with some rather onerous takes on the threat that your business operation may encounter. So that's why I'd always urge that as an organisation yourself, you want to, shall we say, wash that security assessment in the context of your business and operation, okay? Because they tend to have a very risk-averse approach.
And is this something that's done, say, a security risk assessment? Is it done once and then that's it? Or is there a suggestion for an annual update?
Ideally, it's annual, or if you have an event, or you're aware of a change in security threat, because you may need to review specific ways that you do operations at your typical buildings. Okay, so for instance, large vehicle bombs, shall we say, are off the radar in some respects. We have what we call the deathometer, and the needle's well round to the left. Why is that? It's because actually making large explosive devices is quite hard in the United Kingdom. Okay. And getting hold of commercial explosives and so on and so forth. So what we then saw was a move towards the vehicle as a weapon. So the dynamics of the attack profile change. And what a lot of organizations didn't do was then review what it is they physically have as a security measure. Will that still buy down that risk or not? So it's this, when the dynamics change from your threat actor, which you can't, when I say we cannot change because they will upskill, but what we can do then is say, okay, this is what we know. We need to review our risk assessment. Is what we have in the ground, or how our building works and how we brief our people, is it still relevant? Do we need to change anything? And that's why that process should happen at least once a year. But I would suggest that if you're in a particular industry, say the NHS, and you see, you know, information comes out around targeting NHS establishments, it's at that point I would be reviewing my own risk assessment for my buildings.
And how helpful should we expect the police to be in this process?
I would say they've tried to be as helpful as possible, but like all organisations, they've suffered massive losses from financial cuts over the years. Okay, so if I think back, even back when we were planning things like the Olympics, it was being clearly briefed to us that do not expect a blue light response to an incident because all of our staff are taken. So I would say to everybody on the call is, ultimately you're the risk holders. Once you've identified what that risk is, you can't say, oh well, we were expecting the police to do this, if you haven't gone down that understanding of threat and risk and response, and know that you've got a cast iron support there. You've got to own the risk and develop the control measures. That's how I see going forwards, because there just isn't the resource around.
And do you think this new law or the duty I mean, I'm trying to get my head around as in terms of design and then actual building in use. So do you think its biggest impact will come in that design period of having physical?
No, I think it will come across, like I say, in-use establishments. For new builds, there'll be more of an onus. We might find it being planning conditions that you must demonstrate, a bit like the old, you normally get a condition of applying secure by design. At the end of the day, we still need to demonstrate that the environment that we're building under health and safety legislation is a fit place to work, is a safe place to work. So, it's not just the protect duty. We've got to look at the impacts for fire legislation, health and safety legislation, how they all tie together, and then we can demonstrate whether, like say, for a new build, how you demonstrate that in that design process that you've understood the risks and applied the correct control measures for that building or that built environment, that park, that space.
And who is actually the enforcing authority for this? So it'd be the police if there was an incident.
If there was an incident, I expect it to probably fall under something like the health and safety executive. So they'll look at your evidence. Have you done everything that's reasonable and practicable to mitigate? And then if they think that you haven't, they would then start to generate the paperwork to take you through the course. It's not been clearly defined as yet around the inspection and enforcement. There's a lot saying it should be, let industry self-regulate. But there isn't a clear line at this moment in time. All I can say is, if an incident does happen, you might find yourselves, like they are up in Manchester, sat in front of a government-convened board of inquiry, answering why you decided not to do this and went ahead and did something completely different.
And how would you respond if I was to say, if I was a business owner and this is just another bit of legislation come my way, government asking me to do something, when I'd feel, well, a bomb going off, I've got very little chance of minimising that risk anyway, or the impact from it?
Yeah, I think the start point, like I say, you do that risk assessment, see what you think the likelihood is of you being directly attacked or being on the periphery of an attack. Also having that discussion with your insurers and saying, what do you make of this? Okay, then you start to understand what it is you're going to have to do in order to satisfy the requirements that are seen in the protect duty. Like I say, and they're dependent on the size of your organization. Okay, because there's some things that you need to do more training, or they're saying, oh, you upgrade the first aid training and so on and so forth. But it all comes back to, is what you're doing reasonable and practical? How can you reduce that risk to that lowest common denominator for you as the operation?
Catherine's actually coming at a good moment there. Thank you, Catherine. So are we looking at as low as reasonably practicable, as far as reasonably practicable?
I would say as low as reasonably practicable, but you've got to be able to demonstrate how your information has led you to that outcome. Okay, and that goes back to that competency element. If I always say, if I want security, I don't ask any policeman on the street. Okay, but then there are ones that go away and do specific courses. Okay, so it's this. Once you say, well, these are reasonable practical control measures, you've got to have an acid test to say, well, are they? Is what we're saying fit and proper for the environment that we're going to deploy them in, or is there something we've missed? So it goes back, like I say, to that competency of the advisors, where you're getting the information from. Like I say, from my perspective, I can get access to the higher level threat intelligence picture. That informs, that helps me understand that any changes of modus operandi that is occurring from our current brand of terrorists.
So I know from risk assessments, you've got you've got policy, procedure, physical attributes that you can all try and bring that level of risk down. Do you think after completing a lot of risk assessments, the biggest impact is going to be from people power, from policy, or from physical attributes of a building?
I would say people are always from a security context, people from an adversary bring me the problem, but most of the time it's going to be people and liaison with people who are going to help me solve the problem. We can give organizations and buildings the right, shall we say, physical environment, locks on doors, proper windows, and so on and so forth. But if the people then don't understand why that's there, and then they don't use those, then it becomes a waste of time. So definitely that education and understanding with training and information flow to members of staff is always a key tenet of countering terrorism. Yeah, it's you just can't do it without all those eyes and ears on the ground, being aware of their environment and letting, from a security perspective, letting us know if they see something that looks out of place.
And I'm guessing a lot of people might be seeking out for help. And just to revisit the sort of previous slide, you would look for a SABRE accreditation.
SABRE would be a good way to go in many respects, because it quite clearly lays out that that process that you as an organisation can clearly demonstrate your application of security. It's not just about having the latest camera and the biggest door, but it's all more around that management process to ensure that you're reviewing your security. There is an element in SABRE where it asks, are all the legal requirements complied with? Okay, so that mainly relates around safe storage of firearms or nuclear materials and so on and so forth. If there's any specific things like that that your organisation does, they're already mandated and regulated. When the protect duty comes, that's when you would have to be able to show that your risk assessment process understands the impacts for terrorism.
So it's interesting with new legislation how it actually slots alongside existing legislation. So Catherine's point or question, is this modelled around health and safety management regulations with a requirement for a security management system?
There is quite a lot of reference to health and safety within the consultation document that went out, because what the government's trying to say is, oh, we'll just see this as there's no need to spend any extra money on it. You can just bolt it in. The question then goes back is, well, is the person doing the assessment competent to do the assessment? It's a long time ago since I did my courses on scaffolding and ladders, so I wouldn't even go back there for construction site health and safety. Yes, it is, you could say it's a security model, tying them together, having done oil and gas infrastructure projects where they're heavily regulated in relation to health and safety, trying to cobble together a plan, shall we say, has never worked that well. So I definitely think there's more discussion to be had within the wider industry, because ultimately the protect duty is about protecting people in these large spaces where we like to gather, and hopefully there's a bar at the end of it.
Yeah. What's the difference between the security needs assessment and security risk assessment? Okay,
security needs tends to be developed along in relation to BREEAM for, say, a new project. So if an organisation is looking to attain their BREEAM credits, there are credits there for the SNA. The security risk assessment is actually a more of an off-site. What we do is take a look at the business, look at what you do. We then look at who your potential adversary groups are likely to be that may come to impact you, whether that's an outsider, insider threats, and also a combination of the two, insider and outsider, working in conjunction. Okay, so the security risk assessment basically outlines what we see as the risks, or should we say the threat actors are likely to be. You then take that information. What you would then do is then look at the environment itself, go through what the controls are. Do any of these controls buy down those threat actor profiles? Have you got sufficient doors, walls, windows, and so on and so forth? So
yeah, I would say the risk assessment element generally forms part of a larger security strategy that then in turn forms part of a holistic security solution, which might involve technical design elements at the end of it. Whereas the security needs assessment, I suppose it somewhat sits alone in that it provides a basis, like a security sounding of a new development or a redevelopment. And again, that sits under HEA 06, so you can grab that BREEAM credit, and alongside Sabre, that also provides an additional credit under BREEAM.
When are we expecting this to come into effect? I mean, with a pinch of salt.
How long's a piece of string? Like I say, originally it was looking to start progressing and likely to be out there by the end of this year. At the moment, the indications we have of early 2023, because of the impacts of COVID and time on Parliament, etc., to discuss it. So possibly early 2023 at the moment. But,
I mean, to be clear though, however, the security needs assessments, those are existing tools that we have in our lockers already.
Yes, they certainly are. And often I go to businesses and I say, have you got a financial risk plan? Yes. Have you got a security risk plan? No. Well, why not? Because if I can upset your building and your people and downgrade it or whatever I'm asked to do, okay, from a previous life, that's going to impact your financial plan, full stop, because you're going to end up spending money. So it's better to understand what the threats are, how they translate to your assets, what the ultimate risk is if you lose those assets, whether that be people or buildings, etc. And then you can start, shall we say, in slow time, make an appreciation of what you need to concentrate on rather than trying to cover it all in one go.
I'll stop talking because I'm always forever asking questions. With any of the people that are joining, if you do want to chime in with a question, feel free to unmute yourself and come and ask Chris and Rich a question, or send me a message and I'll ask a question. If there's anything specific to your sector, to your industry, have you guys been doing this at the moment? Is security needs assessment something brand new, or something that's something that you guys have been doing for a while? I was asking some people's questions as we went along, so hopefully that means that actually people have gone away and understood a little bit more. Chris, is there anything as sort of key takeaways from this people should know?
From my perspective, the key takeaway is plan now and save yourself a lot of grief later on. Get hold of the consultation document. I know the consultation period is closed, but have a look at the bandings and how they're seeing the organisations. See whether that's and how that applies to what it is you do, and then you can start developing your plan for moving forwards, because the legislation will come eventually. So it's better to, in my mind, to have 1 foot forward before it arrives. And
is that document something we can share with everyone?
Yeah, I can dig out the consultation document. I can also dig out the set of responses that were published a couple of months ago from the first round of consultation. Like I say, at the moment, they've not intimated that they're going to push it out for another round of consultation, but I can push those 2 documents out. That's no problem at all.
Perfect. Yeah, we can send that to everyone on this session if you would like. As I said, this is a session like this from the Learning Lounge with legislation that actually isn't in yet. We're always keen to say, look, we are not the law. It is always subject to change. What we're trying to do is give you the benefit of our experience and what's likely to come and the impact that will have on you. Chris and Richard are always super helpful. So if you do have any questions that you feel more comfortable asking in private, get in touch with us. I'm quite happy to, we can arrange a call. Perfect, Becca, thank you, my glamour assistant. So yeah, feel free to reach out to us, even if it's just a 10-minute chat or you want to ask a question in private. Do come back to us. We'd be happy to discuss anything that we've covered or something that's happening already in the organisation. Natalie has a question. Yeah, so Natalie, if you want to do that offline, feel free, we can get back to you and go from there. Before I sort of close session, last chance if anyone has a question. But I think that means you guys have done a great job and actually everyone's kind of got an understanding of what's coming and how it's going to affect them. So thank you, Chris and Richard.
No worries.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much, everyone. Have a great day. And yeah, stay tuned for the next BB7 Learning Lounge. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Cheers.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, really interesting.
Thank you.